And welcome to The Verdict. Kent Meyers and Mick Cornett joining you again this Sunday morning. We are going to bring a guest today that, Mick, you know very, very well, as do I, but I don't know him like you do.
Absolutely. Mayor David Holt, the mayor of Oklahoma City, will be our guest today. There's just a few things to talk about. This last year has not been the best time to be a public official. Doesn't matter if you're local, state, or federal. But mayors across the country have been in uncharted territory. And now that we can at least see the light at the end of the tunnel, I'd love to get his perspectives on what this year has been about.
Yeah, this is David's fifth appearance on our show, but it's been a while since he's been on. Mm-hmm. And I think he's going to have some interesting stuff for you folks to learn from listening to him. And we're really pleased and proud to bring him to you. So for Mick Cornett, this is Kent Meyers. You're watching The Verdict, and we'll be right back with the Honorable David Holt.
Right now, 6 feet can feel like a long ways away. But from 6 feet, we can still smile at each other. From our doorways and our stairways, from opposite sides of the street and opposite sides of the country. Through fear and frustrations, we can remind each other that we are still here for each other. Because we can still smile at each other. And we're not going anywhere.
When I went over the first time was the USS Kearsarge, it was carrier. And the second one went around the world on USS Hornet. My name is Eugene R. Paler. I'm a Navy veteran of the United States Navy, and I am Chickasaw. It's really a good experience because you get to see how other people live. And I've never been to a country I'd trade for this United States of America. So that kind of puts a tear in my eye. I grew up here in this country. I grew up in Oklahoma. It gives you a pride in the United States of America. If somebody needs something, you'd go help them. It's a pretty good country. We're just a top-notch country, and the people are top-notch people.
See more stories about the Chickasaw people at profilesofanation.com.
And welcome to The Verdict. Kent Meyers and Mick Cornett visiting today with the Honorable David Holt, Mayor of the City of Oklahoma City. David is an Osage American, an attorney, a businessman, and the current mayor of Oklahoma City. He is a graduate of George Washington University for his undergraduate work, Oklahoma City University for his law work, and he has served in the state senate for 8 years, I believe it was. If it isn't, he'll correct me, I'm sure. He worked his way up in leadership positions in the Senate, not surprisingly. So when he decided not to remain in the Senate, he was at that time the majority whip. He is an author. He's authored Big League City, discussing Oklahoma City's entry into the NBA. And in 2018, the voters elected him mayor of Oklahoma City. David, really glad to have you.
Yeah, great to be back. You said earlier this is my fifth appearance. On Saturday Night Live, you get a jacket and you enter the Five Timers Club for that. So,
well, yours is in the mail.
I just probably get a fifth verdict mug, I assume, out of it.
That's right. That's right. Well, when you get six, you got to start giving them back.
Mayor, your first 2 years in office were, I'm going to say, it's somewhat routine, at least routine by today's standards. But boy, I got to tell you, that third year, this last year, and having stayed in touch with you, throughout these last few months, what a wild and crazy time to be in local government. Not just here, but everywhere around the country, as mayors have been scrambling to try and figure out how to deal with this local health crisis.
Yeah. Yeah, the first 2 years for me were, as you well know, mostly about Maps 4, and that's always a Maps projects and their creation and passage are always a big endeavor for Oklahoma City mayors, or at least have been for the last 25 years. But in a sense, that was routine work. I think you've certainly identified the challenges of the last year. We've had the pandemic. We've had sort of a reckoning with racial history and justice in this country, and then just other crazy crises on top of it. We've already forgotten the ice storm, but that wasn't a very fun couple weeks in the fall. I mean, there's any number of things that seemingly usually only happen every 10 or 15 years that all happened in a 12-month period. I think in Oklahoma City, it's particularly unique in a way you would very much understand and appreciate. A mayor of Oklahoma City operates in a council manager form of government. We have as you well know, no unilateral executive authority on a normal day. And we can't even boss the city manager around. We can, we can try to persuade him, but we're not even his unilateral boss. We can only try to direct him collectively with the rest of the council. Well, you contrast that normal situation for an Oklahoma City mayor with what happened with the pandemic. Suddenly on March 15th, I went from that level of power, which is pretty minimal, on paper, to being Julius Caesar. There's a little used provision of our city ordinances that gives the mayor extraordinary authority in emergency situations. And so, I don't know that everybody really understood how different it was. You understood, other mayors understood, certainly people close to the city government understood, but suddenly the mayor, the individual person who is the mayor, was unilaterally making some pretty major decisions, about whether people could gather, whether people could open their businesses or not. I mean, these are things that normally, these are not decisions normally entrusted to one person. So that was certainly an incredible obligation, an incredible responsibility, one I took very seriously, but certainly made for a unique experience. Eventually that subsided. I mean, we actually are still in a state of emergency, but there are no real restrictions in place and haven't been for months. And I consciously moved things towards a more democratic process. And so by the summertime, we were considering things like a mask ordinance as a body, as a council, because I felt like this is democracy. We live in America. I cannot be a dictator forever. We've got to move this towards a more normal process. And so we did that. But even now that we're returning to a normal process, obviously we're dealing with highly unusual issues, asking people to wear masks. These are not things that any mayor since 1918 has had to deal with. And that Mayor Overholser, got the flu and quit. So I wanted to avoid that as well. So anyways, yeah, it's been a crazy year, but I actually think Oklahoma City's done a pretty good job of kind of keeping an even keel, threading the needle, finding the right balance between health and the economy. It's never perfect, but I feel like we've actually muddled through pretty well. And when I look at our health stats and I look at our economic stats, I feel pretty good about where we sit now in early 2021.
Council meetings via Zoom. You didn't see that one coming, did you?
Yeah, and we're actually, as you and I speak, the state has repassed the legislation that will make that possible again, and so we're actually going to return to virtual meetings. It's kind of funny. It worked out for Oklahoma City. We had a major renovation of the city council chambers that was already scheduled, and I don't know what we were going to do. Maybe we're going to meet at the Cox Center or something, but instead we went virtual during that entire renovation, which lasted a good several months. And so totally redid the council chambers, where we then returned in masks between plexiglass for 2 or 3 months while the legislature figured their stuff out. But they have now reinstated the virtual meeting law. And so we're going to do that for a while. It's obviously easier and safer. And actually, it's just like this show, just like 3 meetings I've been in today, and just like your guys' daily experience, I'm sure we've all become more comfortable with that, and I suspect that becomes more of the norm in the long term. All the many numerous boards and commissions that our city has might operate a a little more efficiently if they could do so virtually. That is not the state of the law. The current law is a temporary one, but I suspect that the legislature may look at virtual meetings in the future.
Well, talk a little bit, if you would, David, about your Mask Up OKC campaign, trying to encourage the citizens to wear masks as a prevention measure.
Yeah. Well, you know, the very idea that we need to persuade people sort of reflects what I've been saying from the very beginning. I can issue proclamations. I can be Caesar, you know. I mean, the council can pass ordinances, but these are individual mandates. You know, shelter in place is an individual mandate on you to stay at your home. Wearing a mask is an individual mandate on 650,000 people in our city and just as many visitors that we might have from the suburbs in a given day. We can't enforce any of that. We don't, you know, we have 1,000 police officers, only a few hundred on the street at any given time. And they already got a lot of other things they got to worry about. So we can put these things on paper, and we should. But on top of that, we have to persuade people that this is the right thing to do, because we really can't enforce these things. And so the Mask Up campaign was part of that. You know, nothing beats a good jingle, and so that was a hopefully an effective campaign in creating kind of a social norm, kind of creating an expectation, modeling good behavior. I mean, the biggest problem that we ran into, I think, nationally with masks this past year was just poor modeling of behavior at some of the highest levels. And just wearing your mask, taking pictures of yourself in your mask, you know, was important to getting people to accept what was obviously a very unusual thing to do, you know, but has been, I believe in all the science. I believe in the common sense of it, you know, and I believed that it was helpful to diminishing the spread of the virus. And so I wanted people to do it, and I knew that we had to convince them to do it because they hadn't done it since 1918.
Mick, let me interrupt if you don't mind. We've got to get to a break, and we'll come back to you when we come back from the break. Folks, you're watching Mayor David Holt visiting with us about a lot of things, city and otherwise. Mick and I and Mayor Holt will be back in just a minute. You're watching The Verdict.
OU Law has a history and heritage that are unparalleled. At the University of Oklahoma College of Law, we empower our students to pursue the career of their dreams. We have the highest U.S. News ranking ever achieved by an Oklahoma law school. We are the first law school in the country to launch a college-wide digital initiative. And this year, our competition teams rank number 2 in the nation. OU Law, generations of excellence, limitless possibilities.
This place is all about the water. It was about the water in 1902. It's about the water today. People came from all over the country to bathe in these waters, to drink this water. Early in the history of this park, families came here to camp and to swim and to enjoy these waters. So it's always been a gathering place for families. I'm Bill Wright. I'm superintendent at Chickasaw National Recreation Area, and I am Chickasaw. The Chickasaw Nation recognized that statehood was coming, and the Chickasaw wanted to preserve this area, so they transferred this area back to the federal government in 1902. In 1906, it became the 7th national park in the system. This is my favorite spot in the world. Gosh, my earliest memories in my life were of this park. My grandfather was a park ranger here. He was really the biggest influence on me becoming a park ranger. To come home, to be where my roots are, to come full circle in a career, and then to be back where my heritage comes from as part of the Chickasaw Nation. It's hard to put that all in words, but it's a phenomenal time for me to be back here. Oh, I have the best job in the world. There's no question.
See more stories about the Chickasaw people at profilesofanation.com.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Kent Meyers and Mick Cornett visiting with the Honorable David Holt, Mayor of the City of Oklahoma City. Mick, I rudely interrupted you when you were trying to get a question asked right before the break, so please forgive me and go ahead with what you'd like to ask.
Yep. David, you've had a great relationship with your social media audience. And I just think during this last 12 months, there's never been a time when people wanted or expected to hear of their political leadership more on social media than these last 12 months. And I just wondered how you've handled that. It's kind of a different responsibility, but it is an effective way to send a message, especially if you're trying to use the bully pulpit.
Yeah, early on, really smart people told me, you got to communicate a lot. You're the leader. We're in a crisis. There needs to be a lot of transparency, a lot of communication. I saw other mayors doing daily press conferences, daily speeches. I found that a little overwhelming. I wrote everyone. I don't usually write my speeches, but I wrote every COVID speech I've ever given because they were so important and the information needed to be perfect and I wanted it to be thoughtful and well organized. And I couldn't do that every day. I was just going to be exhausted, by trying to have daily press conferences, and as you know, the office of the mayor does not have, a staff of 20 people. So I moved more towards a weekly, bi-weekly press conference and then supplemented it with social media. So for at least a couple months, I was doing daily updates on COVID-19. And you're right. I mean, the widespread use of social media gives people in that position such a great tool to use that otherwise, I really wouldn't be able to reach people. I'd have to work through the filter of the media. The media's been great and continues to be, but, probably wouldn't have the time to articulate everything I felt needed to be articulated on a daily basis. So, yeah, I would use Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for those kind of daily updates, sharing charts, sharing best practices, tips. I mean, in those early days, it's hard. It's probably pretty interesting to go back now and look at my social media just to remind ourselves how crazy it was back then. I mean, there was a day where I had to, I was telling people you don't need to hoard groceries, cool it on the toilet paper, I mean, like we were, we were sharing all kinds of interesting information in what was a very unique time in our lives. Yeah, so I hope that was helpful. Sometimes the comments to, social media posts, especially as things got slightly more contentious over the summer, become a source of misinformation. And that becomes an extra obligation for me, is trying to address that, trying to figure out what I say to these people who are trying to share information I consider to be inaccurate, borderline dangerous, and how do I deal with that? So, yeah, it became like a part-time job, being my own social media manager, which I have always been, and I still have resisted giving that up. But I felt in this case it was authentic and it was a great avenue to communicate with the residents at a very difficult time.
David, let me ask you a question about Oklahoma City's revenues recently since the COVID crisis. How's Oklahoma City faring from a revenue standpoint, and what does the short-term future look like?
So, of course, March, April were catastrophic to our revenues because our city is predominantly dependent on sales tax. Fortunately, we've had amazing financial management at the city, as Mick knows, and we had some reserves. And actually, for the fiscal year that ended July or ended June 30th of 2020, we actually made a deposit in the rainy day fund for the city. That's how quickly we reacted and were able to make necessary cuts. We adopt our budget in May, June of a given year. And so we were going through a budget process when all of this started. So we ended up adopting a significantly diminished budget. And really, so if you look at our sales tax receipts each month now in this fiscal year that started July 1st, they are always significantly down from the year before, but they have also always been above projections. And so we're actually, really at this time, perhaps on pace to make another deposit in our rainy day fund at the end of this fiscal year, again, because of really shrewd fiscal management. But we did make cuts, and that's unfortunate. we were lucky not to have to do layoffs like other cities have had to do, but we would like to be able to get in a position at some point to restore services. We're basically about down 5% year to year if you look across this fiscal year that started July 1st. We will see how all that plays out. We're not, we've stabilized, but we're not seemingly getting back to where we used to be anytime soon. And the economists seem to think this tail will drag on all the way through 2021. There is a wild card in all of that. As you and I are talking right now, Congress is considering a major support package that could include upwards of $116 million just coming to Oklahoma City. And so that would be used as proposed currently. That could be used for revenue offsets and could help us immediately restore all our budget to its former position and restore all services. But we'll see how that plays out. If that doesn't happen, we'll continue to do what we've been doing, which is trying to minimize the service loss to our residents as best we can.
And staffing at City Hall, I've been around just enough to know that it's like a ghost town over there. I mean, people are working from home.
Yeah. As you know, a lot of our employees can't work from home. We have thousands of employees who are police officers and firefighters and line workers. But the office employees have been a little more staggered. I mean, it's ebbed and flowed. But you're right. City Hall is a bit of a ghost town, and partly because it's essentially shut down to visitors. You can't just walk in the building anymore. You have to check in. And so it's been a little different. I, in fact, have only been there really on average about every 2 weeks, which is obviously unusual for me and for any other mayor. But I have typically just been coming into City Hall for city council meetings. With a laptop, I can, obviously do this job most anywhere, especially when we're doing all our meetings via Zoom. So I miss it though. I love it's a great office and a great building. So I like being down there, but I haven't been as much the last year.
David, the legislature's back in session and we're all kind of holding our breath. But are there matters of particular interest to the cities and your city, our city, that are percolating out at the legislature that we ought to know about? We've got about 2 minutes left.
Sure, I'll be brief. We're always playing defense. It's a perennial thing. We have some minor bills we're trying to push through, but the big bills are always things that are coming after us. And there's a current proposal, and this could be fluid and might change, but as we talk, there's a current proposal to strip us of our health department and Tulsa of theirs as well. And that's a terrible proposal. I mean, absolutely an abomination, considering how many lives we truly believe were saved by the fact that we had independent health departments in Oklahoma City and Tulsa. So that's the kind of example of the thing we may have to fight off. There's also some legislation to strip cities of their ability to respond to pandemics, preemption bills. I think those get less traction, and so I'm not as concerned about them, but we're certainly vigilant about them because they're terrible ideas as well. Virtually everyone in Oklahoma City and Tulsa feels like the only reason they're alive is because we had local control in Oklahoma City and Tulsa, both from a municipal standpoint and from a health department standpoint. It is obviously seemingly an counterintuitive conclusion that we needed more state control in response to this pandemic, but the legislature is always capable of conclusions with which I do not agree. So hopefully we'll get on the same page by the end of session.
Well, you come to that with some substantial legislative experience. We're just about out. In fact, we are out of time, David. Thank you so much for joining us, and best of luck to you in these difficult times. Folks, Mick and I will be right back with a closing word. You're watching The Verdict.
It used to be okay in teachers' lounges. It used to be okay in maternity wards. It was okay in sporting arenas, college campuses, and office spaces. But now that we understand the deadly dangers of secondhand smoke, that's not okay anymore. So why is it okay that thousands of employees are exposed to it every day at work? Bottom line, it's not okay. Let's protect hardworking Oklahomans. Join the fight at stopswithme.com.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, Each child deserves all the quality, assistance, and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
I think for us, once we got started and we began to see the tremendous need just within our state, it really was just a calling for us. The blessings far outweigh any obstacles that we've faced.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
Welcome back. Kent Meyers and Mick Cornett here with you on The Verdict. Had a nice conversation with the Honorable David Holt. Gave you a good report on the status of Oklahoma City, and it looks to me like things are in about as good a shape as it can be under all the circumstances. What do you think, Mick?
Well, I think it was a show where we could illustrate the trials and tribulations of a mayor in the year 2020. It was just a really tough time to be in government, especially local government, and especially in cities where you're trying to figure out how to stop an epidemic from spreading. And I applaud Mayor Bynum in Tulsa and Mayor Holt in Oklahoma City for dealing with these extraordinary times. David's information on the city of Oklahoma City can be found at okc.gov, and this show has a website, theverdict.tv. So check in with us there and tell us about a guest you'd like to see. And that's going to do it for this week's show. Kent and I'll see you next week.